Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for you Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, why do we get 2 weeks of the Indianapolis Colts in primetime? What did we do to deserve this?
It would seem that NBC is a poor negotiator when it comes to television rights. I don't know, man. This is rough. I can't imagine, because the thing is, there's no reason to expect Matt Ryan would be good. There's no reason to expect that the Colts would be good heading into the season. Obviously, they had an MVP candidate in the running back, but no reason to expect multiple primetime games. That doesn't make sense. So it didn't make sense at the outset. It makes even less sense now, although Jeff Saturday is impressing and depressing as a coach. All in the same game, to be able to hold the Eagles close, to follow that up with a potential comeback against the Steelers, who admittedly are not as good as the Eagles, but a great performance in the second half until about 1 minute and 53 seconds left. And then Jeff Saturday was overwhelmed by the fact that he's a head coach and has multiple things to keep track of during a game.
Bill Simmons had an interesting theory 10, 15 years ago that you just need some kid who just plays Madden all day long to just be the guy to tell you when to take a timeout.
There's that's been kind of a meme. I don't even know if Bill Simmons was the first one to come up with it. Certainly the earliest I heard it was from Bill Simmons.
Yeah.
But there was also, I saw, the first analytics book I bought. I forget the name, and if I do remember the name, don't buy it. It's actually not very good. But the first analytics book I ever bought, that was one of the chapters was devoted to exactly that theory. I'm pretty sure they came up with it after Bill Simmons said it, but they may have came up with it independently. Just because, Madden players put in reps of game management, right? In a way that coaches just cannot dream of having thousands of games under their belt with 2 minutes left to go and one score. Only Phillip Rivers has that kind of experience. And
he is just a grizzled old man.
Yeah. And he lost his soul as I guess souls are extremely important to Phillip Rivers. So maybe that's not fair. Anybody who's not familiar with Phillip Rivers is among NFL quarterbacks, extremely religious. But Phillip Rivers lost a part of his being as a result of it. Madden players, they never had one to begin with, so they're fine.
Accurate.
I don't see why you wouldn't do it, just because it's they put in reps, they put in time. The quarterbacks probably have more Madden games with 1 minute left, down a score with one timeout, than the coaches do, right? And so having the quarterbacks take, remember when Peyton Manning, who admittedly has played a lot of football, when Peyton Manning was trying to get the timeout going on Monday Night Football, and he was just on the screen, he was just losing his mind.
Yep. And you know what? There is some logic to just having somebody do that. And I don't know if they have an analytics guy that chimes in and goes, you need to take the timeout. But when Matt Ryan goes for a scramble and comes down about a yard short, you should probably call timeout, not just for the offense, not just to get everybody back, but so Matt Ryan can catch his breath, so that he
right, yeah. It was getting real hairy out there, enough that Matt Ryan felt compelled to scramble, and the worst part is it was working.
Yeah, that no one saw that coming. It was ridiculous. All right, well,
least of all him.
Well, yeah. Matt Ryan's going to go home tonight and go, you'll never guess what I did today, honey. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have another win to review against the Patriots. The Vikings are back to winning ways. So we'll be talking a bit about that game and a bit about what it means kind of moving forward, because the playoffs are beginning to take shape. The rest of the NFC North is terrible. The Packers are no longer in the narrative of being able to make it to the playoffs this year. Thank God. Not for the Packers not making it, just the narrative dying.
Yeah, basically.
Between that and OBJ, I don't want to hear either about either ever again. But
the Packers are still pursuing him. I don't know why OBJ would do that.
Yeah, he's Yeah. And we've got a mailbag as well. But before we begin, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. A special thank you to all of our Patreon people who signed up. Thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate it. Last week, we released 2 bonus episodes. They are up at patreon.com/NorseCode. One was the preview of the Patriots game that Arif conducted, and the other was a nice long bonus episode that the people have been enjoying. So check that out over at patreon.com/NorseCode. And a special thank you to a number of awesome people who signed up this week. Thank you to Elia Reed. Thank you to Connor McManus, Sean Dooley, Jonathan Hack, Andrew May, Carter Good, Isaac Huntley, and Sheldon Hofer, who says, been listening for 3 years, happy to finally join the cause and further kindle the pain that is being a Vikings fan. You can be cool like these people over
Kindle the pain. What a phrase, man.
Yeah. You can be cool like these people over at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well to donate as a one-time donation as opposed to a subscription based, or you can be one of the fine folks who go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up a t-shirt, pick up a onesie, pick up a throw pillow. We sold a couple throw pillows this week for some reason. We appreciate it.
Strong inclusion of me without asking me if I appreciated it. I have mixed feelings on the throw pillow purchases.
Well, it's not a body pillow. We don't have a Reef body pillows.
But my worry is that this is like a gateway pillow.
I don't know. In the Discord, Kyle Slaby had posted what it would take to get a full body pillow, and it was expensive, but it looked worth it.
Well, he didn't ask you to do he did the research.
He did the work. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good Lord.
So.
So anyway, if you're a patron, you can join the Discord and become part of enriching conversations like that. I haven't checked the Discord in like a week. So I'll get on that.
You should eventually do that. They miss you.
Oh, I will check my favorite channel, Online Brained, where I damage myself by looking at the stuff that everyone, but especially Lauren, posts.
Yes,
so
exactly. Well, again, patreon.com/NorseCode, paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can get your Norse Code merch over at norsecode.threadless.com. Great. Let's talk about the game. The Vikings won. Kirk Cousins looked especially good in the second half. Mm-hmm. And I think more importantly, this Patriots team was a good challenge. Like, this was a good game.
Yeah, this is like the best I've seen Mac Jones play this year. Which is not, that's, if you've seen Mac Jones play this year, that's not like a really high bar. So, that's the caveat. But I mean, this is the player that the Patriots were kind of hoping to have coming out of the rookie season, where he was in the running for Rookie of the Year. So, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, Devontae Parker had one of his best games of the year. They were able to get, I think, a lot out of that receiver group, especially. I mean, they had for a brief period of time lost Jacoby Myers, and so like to be able to spread the ball around, I don't know. This was a pretty decent showing for a Patriot squad that, I mean, they have a winning record, so I don't want to say that they're like awful or anything like that, but I think that it would be fair to kind of say that the squad is not as good as the record in the same way that you would say about the Vikings, except that their defense is genuinely phenomenal. We can talk about how the Vikings overcame that.
This was a fun game. This was it was interesting to watch, because it was frustrating for a bit for to watch the Vikings defense have all these backup corners in there and watch Mac Jones shred them. And at the same time, Kirk Cousins was going against one of the better defenses in the league and just slicing and dicing them through the air. This was also to say that they had pretty much grounded Dalvin Cook, but Justin Jefferson was feasting out there.
Yeah, 139 yards plus 11 passing, which means he got 150 yards total.
What a great what a great starting drive. Like that, like you knew that was like, well, absolutely it was drawn up. It was the first drive of the game, but like that moment, like, yeah, Justin Jefferson absolutely like planted that perfectly. It was a great pass.
Yeah. I mean, You could tell he's excited to do stuff like that. So it was nice that it worked out. Kind of funny that it happened in the first drive, but it is becoming impossible to really criticize the Vikings for stuff that happens in the first drive. I think they're 7 of 9 on touchdown rate on first drives. And one of those 9 was like a fumble, if I remember. It was the Dallas game, right?
Yes,
So
it was the Dallas game to start.
Yeah, and so it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with this. The fumble wasn't in the script, right? So there's nothing wrong with the script there. But yeah, generally, I mean, they played to script. I mean, like the story that I wrote was that the Vikings followed the Viking script. Of course, I got like way too into writing this story, so I compared it to The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, the hero monomyth. You can read that story for Pro Football Network. I'm not going to go into super detail on that, but it followed the Viking script, right? They got out ahead. They kind of stalled a little bit in the second quarter. They fell behind in the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, they kind of started turning things around and they ended up with a win. And through that, we saw a bunch of really good stuff from Kirk Cousins. We saw, obviously, Justin Jefferson eating. And he did it against Jonathan Jones, who's been having a really good year. If you listen to our Patreon episode, he broke down, our guest broke down all of the Patriots defensive backs because I find them really interesting. 3 of them are named Jones. But yeah, being able to have that performance against that talented of a secondary and that talented of a pass rush, I think says a lot about the Vikings. And also because they didn't have Christian Darrisaw for the game, I think tells us a lot about how the Vikings should probably approach the way that they design their offense going forward. Because I think having someone as talented as Darrisaw gives them, in their minds, the opportunities to do a lot of stuff that they wouldn't be able to do if Darrisaw's not in there, which makes sense, right? You can hold on to the ball a little bit longer. You can run, certain plays in the running game that you wouldn't be able to run otherwise. You can isolate Darrisaw and create interesting blocking schemes. You can reduce the complexity of the defense in terms of the way that they can disguise their blitzes because of what Darrisaw does. That's all fine, but I think that first thing I said, the ability to hold on to the ball longer, I think they're a little bit too enamored with that. And I think that the quick game is probably something that they need to explore a little bit more because that is something that they had to do. This was not the fastest time to throw that the Vikings had all year. I think that they were faster in the Dallas game, and obviously that didn't work out well. But I think that they should explore some of these quick game concepts a little bit more going forward, even when Darrisaw comes back. Because I think this game gave us kind of an understanding of what they can do because you've got really talented after-catch receivers. Jefferson is one of them. So, I don't know. A really good performance from Kirk Cousins. A really great performance again from Jefferson, who I believe is 1 yard behind Tyreek Hill in the receiving yardage race. Really fun to be able to have a conversation about whether or not he's the best receiver in the NFL.
Why is this team so terrible at screens?
I wish I knew. I feel like there is, because the Rams last year were not bad at screens, right? Like, so it's not as if, he's taking a coaching point from a team that didn't work and trying to kind of fit it. I think that there was probably somewhere, either along the offensive line or with Dalvin Cook or something, and probably not Dalvin Cook, but, keep it in mind, it's possible, right? There's a tell probably somewhere that they're about to run a screen. And I think that people are getting pretty, wary of the Vikings whenever they show that look and are willing to stop the pass rush, start moving towards the screen, or they might be willing to cut underneath the blockers before they're legally allowed to block and then hit the receiver at the point of catch. So I wish I knew, because it's not like the offensive linemen are not athletic enough to get out there, especially because they're not running as many screens where they're asking somebody like Ed Ingram to get out ahead. They're running a lot more screens where they're asking somebody like, Darrisaw or Garrett Bradbury or Ezra Cleveland or Brian O'Neill to get out ahead. And they're certainly athletic enough to pull off most screens in the NFL. So I don't know what it is. I don't think it's the talent level of the people blocking. I don't think it's the talent level of many of the people catching the ball on these screens. I don't know how good TJ Hawkinson is at screens. I would probably get rid of that play. But like, Dalvin Cook has done pretty well on screens in the past. I don't know what's going on. So I think the most likely scenario is probably that there's a tell, and they need to figure out kind of what it is that they're giving opposing defenses that are giving up. Because when you look at Cousins on non-screen passes, I mean, his yards per attempt, if you look at every quarterback, I should clarify, You do this for every quarterback. You get rid of the screen passes in every quarterback. Cousins shoots up the board in terms of like yards per attempt and stuff like that. Still not where he was last year, right? We had that discussion in the mailbag in a little bit, but his performance, right? Because he probably doesn't have much of an impact on screen performance. Ball location matters on screens. Maybe he's the one giving the tell. So, it might be him, but more likely than not, this is a fair way to evaluate quarterbacks. He does move up. But it is frustrating to watch, especially when you don't know what the reason is.
It's very, this is a team that like was the best in the league at the screen like recently. So it's just impressive to see that everything is just fallen so far as the screen is concerned. But it's just weird to watch this week in and week out. Well, let's start with Kirk Cousins. Cousins threw a ugly little interception, but corrected himself. And really, I don't want to say that he took over this game, but Cousins was good.
Yeah. You take a look at something like an 81% completion rate and you think, he probably wasn't throwing it very deep very often. And, I guess he wasn't throwing it deep super often. I mean, his average depth of target was like 6 or something like that. It was pretty short. But, he did have a couple of big time throws in there. He got lucky too. Like, here's the thing. I keep on saying that Cousins had a really good game. You do want to ameliorate that with the fact that with his good throws came some pretty catastrophically bad throws. He threw the pick. He also threw 2 other throws that probably should have been picked off. I think one of Jonathan Jones and, which I believe was the one that KJ Osborne. No, it was a different one that was nearly a screen pass. And then there's the one that KJ Osborne saved. So that should, get in there. But, someone asked me like, hey, Arif, I think that, you take a look at his statistics, 8.1 yards per attempt, 81% completion rate, 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. Says he played pretty well. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about, his ball placement, his anticipation, his location. And I looked, and the first time I looked, I thought that was kind of an issue. And so I was like, maybe he didn't actually have that good of a game. But, the next time I looked, I paid a little bit more attention to that kind of question. And I think his ball anticipation, his accuracy, his ball placement was fine outside of a couple of throws like that one. So there were some pretty big negatives in there, but I do think that his positives in this game, like if you get rid of the outcome, right? If you get rid of the yardage and the yards after the catch and stuff like that, right? And you just take a look at how good was this throw, I think that the positives, were outweighed the negatives. One thing that is also worth mentioning is that this is one of the lowest pressure to sack ratios that he's had in the game, because it wasn't like he wasn't under pressure. He's under pressure a lot. Let's see if I can pull up the specific number. So he was pressured on 40% of dropbacks, or I should say 39.5. I wrote a piece last year for The Athletic where I mentioned that once quarterbacks hit a 40% pressure rate, their winning rate drops off a cliff. Like, that's kind of the magic number. And I think it was PFF Sam that first mentioned this. So I can't take credit for like finding it, but I did test it and I wrote it in a piece. And in that piece, I took a look at the winning percentages at 40 plus, 20 minus, and the 20 to 30 range in between, or 21 to 39 range in between. And quarterbacks win like 20% of their games as soon as they hit this 40 plus threshold. I would say that, it's probably linear, but it just feels like a cliff. I would say that the 39.5% pressure rate that he was under is enough for us to qualify it and say this is a pretty impressive performance from him when it comes to pressure rate. He averaged a higher yards per attempt under pressure than not under pressure. Again, performance under pressure is unstable. It is, like many of the things that have happened with the Vikings this year, unsustainable. But that doesn't mean it's not worthy of praise when it happens. It's just difficult to replicate. That doesn't mean it's not impressive when it does occur. And I think here he did a pretty good job getting rid of the ball quickly. So that should be noted, right? That he did a pretty good job there. On throws where he wasn't pressured, I don't think a lot of it was that the offensive line held up super well. I think actually that the win rate of the opposing defense on pass rush was pretty good, but he got rid of the ball super quickly, and now I can actually see it. His time to throw on unpressured plays was 2.34 seconds, so that actually tracks with what we're thinking. But his overall time to throw is 2.63 seconds of the game, faster than it normally is. It's a It's about a league average time for most quarterbacks. That is a very fast time for Kirk Cousins, given his history in play action oriented offenses. But even if you get rid of play action, it was still pretty fast. I think it was like 2.54 seconds, which for all quarterbacks, when you get rid of play actions, like in the top 10-ish in terms of speed. So pretty good in terms of reading defenses and getting the ball where he needs to go. This was not like a couple of games ago where he had really good statistics, but a lot of it was he was getting bailed out on contested catches by Justin Jefferson, and he was creating contested catches with poor accuracy and poor ball placement. Here, he's got better ball placement. Again, the KJ Osborne throw was almost catastrophic, and maybe we'd be talking about Kirk Cousins a little bit differently if Osborne didn't catch it. So, we have to, stopgap that. But I think that the other throws that he had throughout this game tell us that he might be getting closer. And maybe it's because this game plan more resembled what he's used to because of how quick the passing game was. But he might be getting closer to that guy that we were talking about, where you want to marry kind of the stuff that he's learning about being an improvisational quarterback and having situational football with the stuff that he's been good at before, the stuff like that's on standard dropbacks and first and second down and stuff like that.
It's weird to watch this offense at times because it's hard. Well, I say it's hard to root against it, but like Justin Jefferson is coming down with just about everything that comes his way. I think the only ball I saw him drop was in the post game thing where he had a turkey leg and a football in one hand and was like chewing on the turkey leg. And they tried to, and Kevin O'Connell tried to throw him the ball as a game ball thing. Like, I think that was his only drop. Like, the man is absolutely on a tear right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really fun because he tried to like one-hand it because he had the turkey leg and he dropped the ball, and it was just like, that's how you one-hand some much more difficult passes in the past couple of weeks, man.
I enjoy the fact that like the whole locker room went, oh, like,
yeah,
like really, you're gonna drop that one?
Yeah, that was really good, man. I mean, and they're like, oh, we got to give him another chance. We got to give him another chance, and then they just handed the ball to him. It's really great. But yeah, I mean, and like speaking of, the game ball went to Jefferson. It also went to Kenny Nwangu.
Finally broke one out.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah, and again, I guess that was something that the locker room was saying too, because when he was giving the game ball out, he was like, we've been waiting for it all year. We've been close to getting it. We finally got it. Game ball goes to Kenny Nwangu, and I was like, oh, I feel like the same thing. It felt like it was getting close a couple of times because he had a couple of like 30 or 40 yard returns where he was like an ankle away from housing it, and he finally gets around to it. I guess based off of the post game interviews, they. I think it was Kirk Cousins who shared this. They kind of drew it up at halftime, right? where they probably saw something in the way that kickoff coverage was being handled, and they saw, hey, they're always going to kick it to this particular location. Their kickoff coverage unit kind of angles this way. If we just block in this way, we should be able to get a seam, and that's exactly what happened. And so, really important, right? Because that if you believe in momentum, that sparked a drive. If you don't believe in momentum, that was a critical score to have in a 2-score game. So, yeah, I don't know. He had 2 touchdown returns last year in his 8 or 9 games that he was healthy the second half of the season. And it really felt like, hey, if he had one or two more games where he was healthy, he would have made the Pro Bowl as a returner because his return average is number 1 in the NFL. His touchdown rate was number 1 in the NFL. On kick returns, he just didn't play enough games, especially because the games were in the second half of the season when Pro Bowl voting had already started, which, by the way, I think Pro Bowl voting is still active because Jefferson leads all players in Pro Bowl votes, much less, receivers, right? And then I guess Christian Darrisaw is like 6th among tackles, 5th among NFC tackles. So AFC competition at tackle, I guess, not too tough. Really, really cool to see because I had been really excited about the ability of the Vikings to maintain excellent field position as a result of their kickoffs. And they were doing that, but it just felt like there was a lot more coming from it last year. And given how excellent the rest of the special teams unit has been, the punt coverage, the punts themselves, the punt return has been pretty decent. Given how excellent, aside from the actual punt returner, the punt return has been pretty decent. The kickoff coverage has been phenomenal. And so I was kind of waiting, hey, if Wong was able to do this last year, the special teams unit that was not as well tuned, why isn't he breaking one off this year? And I know that variance plays a big role in it, but it was nice to see it actually kind of turn into the touchdown that we were waiting would happen.
This was all happening against a Belichick-led team. Like
They haven't given him a kickoff return touchdown since 2010. It was to CJ Spiller for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, this is we talk about hangover games in the past, and Vikings getting just destroyed, and then having to have the memory of a goldfish and going back out there and playing. But like, this was an absolute turnaround from what happened in the Cowboys game. Like, this was being able to easily forget what happened and move on, and that has not been a trait of Vikings football in a really long time. This is the year of like kicking narratives.
Yeah, I think, speaking of kicking, I think last year we heard basically the same lines where they had a short week, and at the beginning of the short week, they lost this awful game, and they were like, well, at least it's a short week, so we can concentrate on the game going ahead. It's kind of a blessing in disguise. We don't have to think about this too much, and we'll just kind of double down and get invested in the short, and then they lose the short week. Here, it very much seemed like, I guess that happened, huh? That's pretty great. It's difficult to say like why exactly this thing happened, and it's tough to point to like an attitude that someone has during practice or anything. But it certainly seems like that, at least from the outside looking in. I don't know if the inside it would have been a little bit different if they'd won the Cowboys game, or if this was a long week instead of a short week, what would have happened. But from the outside looking in, certainly it seems like it was nice to kind of get that out of everyone's brain so they can have a win. In their recent memory, when they talk about this team, they only had 3 or 4 days of them being miserable for them to have to deal with it, which is much better than the week of them being miserable after the Eagles game.
Well, yeah. Well, let's talk about, you mentioned the Wongwu return for a touchdown. It kind of leads to another thing that the Patriots fans are complaining about, is the number of calls they feel that went against them. Whether it be the supposed block in the back by CJ Ham, and Captain Ham doesn't do that sort of thing. I don't know what you're talking about. But between that and the catch that wasn't a touchdown.
The Hunter Henry touchdown? Yeah.
The catch that wasn't a catch. Or the running into the kicker, which that was their own fault. Like, Right is up there. That's absolutely something you call.
And the missed face mask on Danielle Hunter, I think, is a better one to complain about.
Yeah.
With Mac Jones's face mask. But yeah, I will say the officiating in the game was bad. There were moments where they officiated poorly in the Patriots' favor, right? I think for one example is like a false start that Trent Brown, like very clearly false start, and they just didn't call it. I think there's another 12 men on the field penalty that they didn't call, like second week in a row or something like that. And I'm willing to say that, like, okay, yeah, I think that on balance, the Patriots got the short end of the stick when it comes to the way the refereeing played out. I think especially the Hunter Henry thing, I think that was just poorly officiated. And I don't think it followed what the league guidelines are for replays, which is that it must be indisputable to overturn because it was ruled a touchdown on the field. And surviving the ground is not in the rule book as a phrase anymore. There is the concept of not maintaining possession after hitting the ground if you don't make a football move, which could be applicable here. Again, I don't actually think that matters because I don't think the ball ever hit the ground. But, or I should say never. It's tough because like the ball hits the ground while it's in possession. I don't know. It's tough. But it's not as relevant as like the last time surviving the ground made headlines like yesterday, right? We're recording this on Monday. So on Sunday, I forget who it was, but they made like 3 steps and then they dropped the ball and it was ruled an incompletion. It was like, well, come on, clearly. Yeah, I think that the officiating in this game was pretty bad. I think that this is probably a bottom 10th percentile officiating game this season. I will say that the officiating this season, as much as we complain about it, as many bad calls that I've seen, both help and hurt the Vikings this year. I feel like it's better than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. So there is that. But this game was particularly poor. And I think it hurt the Patriots more than it hurt the Vikings, but it's not as if the Vikings got, scot-free on these bad calls. They certainly got hurt on a couple of these calls. I just think that was it enough to swing the game? Maybe. But I don't think the Patriots were denied like a clear win as a result of it. So yeah, I think it's fair for Patriots fans to complain about it. I don't think it's fair to focus entirely on it as if that is like the reason. Like the reason is because Justin Jefferson went off. The reason is because KJ Osborne caught a pass that should have been a pick, right? Those are bigger reasons in my mind. I guess the kickoff return touchdown, if you're really concerned about that being a block in the back, that if that's a block in the back, I can see that being called a block in the back, right? I can see that. I think that is one of those calls that's like 50-50. If the official doesn't call it, it's fair. If the official does call it, it's fair. That's not one I would complain about too much. But I get where people are coming from there. But just like don't get exposed in the kickoff return game. Like that was the bigger issue.
Well, I want to ask another question about, I suppose, the defense now. Who is going to be playing corner like this season now? Because Andrew Booth is now out with surgery, might not be coming back for a couple of weeks. Like, who do we have left back there?
Well, Caleb Evans might be returning soon. There was an update from Kevin O'Connell today that seemed pretty optimistic on that front. But Andrew Booth did get a meniscus surgery, which of all the potential knee surgeries to get, right, because it sounded like in order to get a better understanding of what they were looking at, they needed to open up his knee and then decide how to proceed with the surgery, which I guess feels really ominous, but I guess it wasn't. So out of all the potential knee surgeries it could have been, it's probably on the better side of things in terms of returnability and long-term injury concern. But yeah, you don't have him. Cam Dantzler's on IR. I don't know, if he's going to come back, in a couple of weeks when he's eligible to come back. But Caleb Evans sounds like he's coming back soon. If not, you're going to have more Duke Shelley, who at least has played all right. I'm not super confident, but it's not like, he's playing like, what was his name? Bobby Sapp? The guy that they grabbed.
Benny Sapp.
Benny Sapp. Those are the guys that they grabbed off the street like a couple of years ago. And they were just like, we have one corner. It's Marcus Sherrills. He's not really a corner. He's a returner. Let's get some guys in here. He's playing better than like Benny Sapp did. But Tay Gowan, I guess, who's been elevated a couple of times, would be an option there. But I think that you'll probably get a Caleb Evans back. And he's been playing, he's made some pretty big mental errors, but he's been playing actually pretty well outside of that, which I guess which is kind of like Cameron Dantzler, right? Which, as far as digging into your backups go, not the worst thing in the world, right? Like you're down two corners. Having someone like a Caleb Evans as like your third backup when you've got your starter still in there is a much better situation to be in than otherwise.
Yeah, it's rough. There's not a lot of depth going on right now, and at some point the bill comes due. So this is a team that's heading toward the playoffs. And
and one of the reasons that I kept mentioning that the Vikings could potentially hit a wall is they're the healthiest team in the league. I think that may still be true, right? But a couple of weeks ago, they're the healthiest team in the league. That won't necessarily last, right? Like you might say, hey, they've got a really great injury program that they were able to essentially steal from the Rams, who were the least injured team in the league last year when they won the Super Bowl, right? But all that sports science stuff can do is reduce the odds, right? It cannot eliminate those odds, and there is still a pretty good chance that an important player is going to get injured. And that's after, we talked about it. We saw Dalvin Tomlinson get injured. We saw Christian Darrisaw get injured. We saw Cameron Dantzler get injured. We saw Caleb Evans get injured again. We saw Andrew Booth go on IR. Like those are all like individually, none of those injuries are easy to predict, but the fact that injuries to starters occurred that hurt the quality of the team overall, that was easy to predict that was going to happen. Now, I don't know about like that wave of injuries, but it was basically, hey, part of the reason regression happens is if you're an unusually lucky team in some respect, whether that is health or fumble recovery or special teams turnovers or whatever, that sort of thing that is low frequency, high variance, high impact, that's going to be the stuff that you're not going to get, or it's going to hurt you later on. And this is kind of one of those things. So the Vikings are kind of very skeletal as a team. There's not a lot underneath it. They don't have a ton of depth. And so they've got really good starters, right? And I think the concern a lot of people had going into the year was the depth, and they just haven't had to dig into that depth too much outside of cornerback. And now we're kind of seeing what happens. We're hoping that Kairos Tonga has a great game at nose tackle because Dalvin Tomlinson's out. We're hoping, that James Lynch can continue to improve, and he's just not improving fast enough for you to be comfortable with what he's doing, right? You're hoping that Duke Shelley, who was most recently cut from the Bears, is like not a disaster, which, I mean, that's working. He's not a disaster, right? But you're running out of guys where you're just like, man, if a couple of things go the right way, this isn't as bad as we thought, right? It's like the thing. And now we're kind of testing the depth. Hopefully we'll get Devin Tomlinson back soon. It sounds like that is a possibility that he's going to come back soon. And Caleb Evans, like I said. But obviously they're not going to get, Cam Dancer back right away. They're obviously not going to get Andrew Booth back probably for the rest of the year. But it is it is something to consider.
It's unfortunate, but
yeah.
This is where we're at. We're deep in a run right now, and that is absolutely what's happening because the Packers have basically lost out. Whether or not Rodgers plays another down this year is also in question, which, I mean, I was hoping for a blowout loss for the Packers, but if the Packers were able to lose and have a quarterback controversy with it, that's even better. But like Packers are not looking to be a part of the playoffs, and right now the Vikings are sitting firmly in the second seed. They might move down a little bit. I don't see them taking first from the Eagles because the Eagles are going to have to lose 2 games, right?
Yeah, exactly. The Eagles are record-wise a game ahead of the Vikings, and then also they of course have the tiebreaker because they whipped the Vikings. So in order for the Vikings to be ahead of them, the Vikings have to gain 2 games against them. So which would mean that if the Vikings went out and the Eagles lose 2, right, then the Vikings get the top seed, right? But it is looking less and less likely that the Eagles will lose 2. If they do lose 2, the Vikings have to win. I mean, it's just a low odds that the Vikings absolutely win out. So yeah, it is pretty tough to see them getting the first seed. This is kind of one of the better opportunities, which, but it also seems really unlikely that they will drop all the way to the 3rd seed, right? Because the NFC South is not going to get it. They're going to be the 4th seed. None of the wild cards can get it because that's just not how the system works. So it's really up to the NFC West, and I don't see it because I think the Seahawks are the division leaders, and they're 2 games back from the Vikings as well. And so it'd have to be the exact same scenario, right? Where the Seahawks win 2 more games than the Vikings do to finish out. And I believe the Seahawks have a better conference record, right? Because the Vikings lost to 2 conference opponents. So it is in that scenario possible that they win the tiebreaker if they win 2 more games than the Vikings. But that seems pretty unlikely at this point, especially with the way the Seahawks defense sometimes plays. So the Vikings are pretty firmly the 2nd seed, and certainly they have the opportunity to clinch if, crazily, it's the Lions who have to lose in order for the Vikings to clinch. But if the Vikings win and the Lions lose, they clinch the division title. And they'd be the first team to clinch it. Obviously, they wouldn't be the best team, right? Because the Eagles just are in a better division with more wins. So they can't clinch it right away. But the Vikings could be the first team to clinch their division next week. So, yeah, I really do think that the 2nd seed is overwhelmingly the most likely scenario, which, a couple of weeks ago, I didn't think that they would even get the 2nd seed. So, good for them. This is absolutely a huge.
You know what's great is that it looks like Norse Code won some money this year because there's no way that the Bears are going to be able to overtake their 7 wins. Like the over.
It was looking real dicey after Justin Fields figured out how to play quarterback. It was like, oh no,
yeah. And then people forced
my
him to
money
throw.
League is great because I had Justin Fields on a fantasy team, right? But it was like, ooh boy.
Yeah, but the moment you made him throw, there's the problem. He's a quarterback who can't throw the ball. That seems wrong.
And then Trevor Siemian, right?
and then Nathan Peterman. So like everything's wrong.
I'm
Anybody
so
who,
ticked off. I gotta say, so that money league, I've got Justin Fields. I rostered Trevor Siemian, and then the news happened that Nathan Peterman would start. So I was like, okay, well, so I roster Nathan Peterman, and I need to make room. And it's like the only person I'm willing to cut for Nathan effing Peterman is Trevor Siemian. So I cut Trevor Siemian, which makes him unaddable, right? And so then they're like, well, it's a game time decision. We don't know. And I'm just like, well, hopefully it's Peterman, I guess, which is the first time I've ever said that in my life. Make him my starting quarterback. It's a 2 quarterback league. That's why there are no other starting quarterbacks available. Start Nathan Peterman. Trevor Siemian gets 10 points. All I need, if in a world where I start Trevor Siemian, all I need is Najee Harris to get like 20 points for me to win. I'm on a 3-game winning streak. I was already ready to sell my team for draft picks, and now I'm buying players to get into the playoffs so I can win back my my entry fee. Now I can't do it. Just a miserable season for me. I'd rather have just lost out.
meanwhile, I was in a situation where with the Jets, it looked like Flacco was going to start initially, so I grabbed Flacco, and then it came out that it was going to be Mike White. I'm like, I can't add Mike White.
Actually, 2 days ago, I was in a trade negotiation at the deadline, and I was like, hey, maybe I should throw Mike White in there. And I did, and I was like, that's dumb. I'm an idiot.
Yeah. Meanwhile, one of the leagues that I'm running that I have the Jets defense is like, oh, thank you, and thank you, and thank you.
Yeah.
It's like, that was wonderful. I beat the hell out of Dusty. It was wonderful. All right. Well, there's not much more to cover. This is a game that's basically a week old. Let's get into the mailbag and talk a couple of points from the game, including the most important thing that could have happened involving the Vikings and Thanksgiving. Damian Barrett asks, did Thielen's public rejection of Turkey catapult him to the top spot in a Reefs Hall of Fame?
It will be hard to beat Alan Page. I don't think that he'll do that, but he's probably in my top 5 Vikings now. I think that's fair. He didn't reject turkey. I will say that he rejected the turkey that was served to him because, in his words, it was kind of dry. Now, mind you, we do have to compare this to, I think it was what Josh Allen said on the CBS when he ate the turkey, and he said it was much better than last year. And last year, I think he had the NBC turkey. And so the reporter said, well, CBS, we do it a little bit better here. So it might just be that NBC, the whole television station, doesn't know how to cook. Like, so we have to consider that possibility, right? And again, my stance is that turkey has a lower margin for error. And so you're much more likely to do stuff like make it dry and make it difficult to eat.
Kirk didn't care. Kirk was chowing down on that thing. Kirk was
I
like,
highly
this is the
suspect
best
we
thing
we have strong evidence that Kirk doesn't know what good food is. So
well, there is the picture of the steak without any sort of stuff. Yeah.
So I am, and like, I don't even need to slander Pizza Ranch to get here, right? I don't even know if he actually eats that. But the evidence we have strongly suggests that we should not follow our culinary cues from Kirk Cousins. His enjoyment of that turkey, I think, is as good of an advertisement against turkey as Thielen's rejection of the turkey.
I just liked him spitting out the turkey, like on camera.
Yeah, absolute disgust, which I respect. You know, Thielen is a very hard on your sleeve kind of guy, which for certain receivers is called being a diva, but for Thielen, it's just passionate.
Yeah.
The fact that he and Bill Belichick hate each other, that's just passionate.
The fact that continues.
Yeah, it was like 3-4 years ago.
Yep.
Where they were just yelling at each other.
The two of them have this hilarious, like, intertwined situation. It is so dumb. I love it so much that when the tweets were coming out of the two of them passing like ships in the night, neither one of them just like looked at each other, just like mother. As they walked by.
What's interesting is that like there are some people who I don't think were Vikings fans just because it started going a little bit viral. So it kind of got out of Vikings for. So some people who weren't Vikings fans that were just like, oh, a white wide receiver, Bill is absolutely going to resolve this. And it's going to be, it's all, water under the bridge. They're going to, he's going to sign Thielen to like a 2-year contract at the end of his career and they're all going to make it up. And it's like, no, you don't understand the history here. They hate each other.
Yeah. These dudes are not bearing any hatchet. No. Also from Damian Barrett, given the team's record so far this year, what's the likelihood that we lose one or both coordinators in the offseason? Do our defensive woes, offensive head coach calling plays, and the relative newness of the whole coaching staff setup mean that we would be immune from poaching?
I think that it's pretty unlikely that they're going to lose either coordinator. One, because Wes Phillips is not seen as the offensive architect for the Vikings. Two, the defense is just like not good. And three, you don't tend to take a special teams coordinator after his first year was good, right? Like it's just like, yeah. So I don't think we'll see that.
The only thing that would happen with special teams is like another team may ask to look into him, but the Vikings are able to block that.
Right. Yeah. It has to be like a promotion, right? Which all coordinator positions are seen as one tier, right? And it used to be that all assistant coaches were one tier, so it could only be for the head coach. But now the coordinator positions are also seen as a tier. So if a quarterback's coach for one team is being interviewed by another team to be the offensive coordinator, teams can no longer block that. They used to be able to. Now they can. But with special teams coordinator, he's at the highest level that's not head coach. No one's going to ask him to be. I don't know. I mean, Jeff Saturday just got a job, so maybe I'm wrong. But I think it's unlikely that Matt Daniels gets poached for a head coach job soon, which I would run through a wall for that guy. So, I mean, it might be sooner than we think, but I don't think it's this year.
Ed Donatello asks, if you had to compare the Patriots game to a Thanksgiving dish, side or main, that you are this year, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's kind of interesting. I don't think it would be stuffing or mashed potatoes because not only are those hard to screw up, at least in my experience, but they're also like top tier sides. So the reason I picked mashed potatoes first overall in the Thanksgiving draft, which unfortunately I placed third, but when you've got a brand and a gimmick and you cannot take the most popular main as a part of your brand,
it's going to happen.
You do set yourself back a little bit. I did win a Thanksgiving draft a couple years ago, so it's not as if it's impossible, but I think I made a mistake with the Cornish game hen over just a roast chicken. I should have just gotten the roast chicken. But I wouldn't say that it's one of those. Actually, the roast chicken might be a good comparison. Maybe candied yams. Okay, my thought process here is that the game was mostly very good, but there were just moments here and there that left a bad taste in your mouth. And so maybe a chicken is a good comparison because even if you spatchcock your bird, but let's say you don't, if you're cooking a chicken whole and roasting a chicken whole, there is a very good possibility that you miss an important step, like tucking the wings in, or foiling the bones of the drumsticks. And there's just parts of that chicken that are like overcooked or off, while most of the chicken is cooked really well and tastes really good. You know, the dark meat's at like 170, 175, the white meat's at 160, 165, whatever, right? It's moist and all that. But there are just areas of that chicken that should be a lot better, like the wings, that just aren't because you just made a mistake here or there. Easily preventable, but fairly common type mistake. So I'm going to go with the roast chicken. It was mostly a very good game. You have moments where, like, you know, you're eating, like, let's say the oyster of the leg, right? Which is the piece of meat that connects almost to the breast. That's like the Kene Nwangu return touchdown, right? It's like this great dark meat cut that's fatty enough to be really enjoyable, but not so fatty that you feel kind of sick eating it. And then you've got like the 3 picks, which are like, I love chicken wings. I'm going to try chicken wing. Oh my God, it's burnt for some reason, right? So I think maybe it's the roast chicken.
Well, next question is going to be from John Belk, who asks, one of the reasons for optimism in the sustainability corner has been that Kirk has a track record of playing much better in most areas. Are there examples of a quarterback with that sort of situation turning it on this late in the season? If he does, how good of a team would this be?
That's kind of an interesting question. Excluding like younger quarterbacks that are turning it on for the first time. So, for example, Justin Fields. In some ways, Trevor Lawrence as an example, although he started off the season pretty hot too. It was just kind of that middle stretch wasn't great. Had a phenomenal game just now. But Trevor Lawrence is maybe a decent example. But in terms of like quarterbacks that have been around for a while that have been good and then go through a rough stretch before turning it on again, especially partway through a season as opposed to had a bad year and then had a good year. Like Phillip Rivers is a good example of a guy who just had 2 bad years and everyone's like, man, are you hurt? And then he just has like an all pro quality season right after that. So excluding that, I'd say both Brady and Rodgers have had that happen where partway through a season, I think like, was it 2013 Brady, 2016 Rodgers, I want to say, where the first half of the season was just really rough. And then the second half of the season was like the kind of stuff that you kind of remember from that quarterback. So that's, I think, part of it. Tom Brady has famously said, along with Bill Belichick, that, real football doesn't start until Thanksgiving. Bit late for him this year, but, it's something that he said in the past. So that's happened. I don't think Drew Brees has ever had that happen. Peyton Manning, I don't think that's happened. I guess his first year with the Broncos, which counts as a new offensive system, right? His first year with the Broncos, it started off pretty weak and ended up really, really strong. And maybe you could draw some parallels there, but it has happened. The problem is we remember these elite quarterbacks, right? Like Brady's and Rodgers and Manning. But like, I don't find like Joe Flacco seasons to be very memorable, right? And so, except for the season where he was elite, right? And so if Flacco had a rough start to a season and then turned it on in the second half of the season, that may have happened. I don't remember it. I wanted to say that like Matt Schaub had this happen at one point, but like I don't have a strong enough memory of Matt Schaub to say that definitely happened. Like I can't come up with a bunch of average to above average quarterbacks and say that this happened. Maybe 2015 Matt Ryan actually would be a good one, right? Because 2016 was his incredible MVP season. 2015 started off real rough for him. It took a while. Like I don't think it was like at the halfway point of the season, but at the end of the 2015 season, I think he did it. And then you've got quarterbacks that they turned it on late, but that was probably more variance than talent. Like the Jets, Geno Smith was able to turn it on late 2 seasons in a row, and it just never panned out. Obviously, this version of Geno Smith now is a lot better, but they're not the same quarterback, essentially. Teddy Bridgewater turned it on late in 2015. Unfortunately, we were not able to see if that turned into anything in 2016. But yeah, I mean, I think that this does happen often enough that you can say that there's probably something there to at least hope that it could happen with Cousins.
Let's stay on that topic. Euleron asks, has Kirk Cousins earned his contract extension? If not, what do the Vikings need to see to solidify that outcome?
I think for the Vikings, assuming that, they don't lose like, 4 of their next 6 games or however many are left in the season. I think there's no way there's 6 games left. Is there? 17-game season? Yeah. Okay. 6 games. If they lose 4 of their next 6 games, maybe we can have this discussion, right? But I think for the most part, if that doesn't happen, and it seems unlikely to happen, I think for the Vikings, it would mean that he's earned that extension. For me, it wouldn't. For all of the reasons that I've talked about in the previous couple of episodes about how, while it is exciting that he's improving in the areas that he's historically been weak at, he just hasn't been able to maintain his level of play in areas that he just hasn't been all that strong at. And I'm not a just wins kind of guy when it comes to quarterbacking. So yeah, I personally would not offer him that. He's got another year under contract anyway. Let him continue to play under that contract while you negotiate with his agent during the season if he continues playing at this kind of pace. So I wouldn't say that, but I think that from the Vikings perspective, they would.
Professor Poop asks, much to my delight, the defense has been entirely poopy the last several weeks, honestly most of the season. To me, this is perplexing, as we've had an overall crappy defense last season, but that was still stellar in certain metrics, like third down percentage and total sacks. What explains our poopy performance this year? To me, it must be coaching, because on paper, our roster is notably more talented than in 2021.
Yeah, I I think it is. So some of this is a fair criticism of Ed Donatel. Some of it is just, hey, Donatel is just, I'm not going to say he's in over his head. He's not, but rather he's just not as talented of a coach compared to other defensive coaches across the league. Some of it is that the person that we're comparing him to is Mike Zimmer, one of the greatest defensive minds of the past 20 years. And this is what I said would probably happen, despite the fact that there was going to be a talent increase, that Mike Zimmer was really good at making a defense consistently good at the things that, there's that word again, that are generally not sustainable from year to year. If you take a look at stuff like red zone touchdown rate and third down rate, that stuff is so volatile from year to year for defenses. And it's tough to say why that's the case. You know, it could be that good defensive coordinators become head coaches, but they don't become play callers when they become head coaches. And so the stuff that made them a good defensive coordinator is not with the same team anymore. And so, maybe you could say that. But the Vikings had the unusual scenario where they had a defensive play caller as their head coach. And so they were able to get a guy that was an absolute maven on third downs, even in the years the Vikings were not great on defense. At least on third down, they were fantastic, right? And here the Vikings just don't have that talent. They're about as good on third down compared to the rest of the league as they are on first and second down. That's pretty normal. So the high leverage stuff they're getting worse at, the low leverage stuff, they're a little bit better at than they were last year. And it turns out the high leverage stuff, by nature of being high leverage, matters a little bit more. So yeah, a lot of it is not that Ed Donatell is a bad coach, although I think that there is, something there. But it is that he's being compared to a remarkably gifted defensive coach.
Lee has the next question. For a Reefs kicker conspiracy corner, what does Greg Joseph know that we don't? He's now missed 5 extra points, yet we're undefeated when he does so. Is he secretly a math genius and knows exactly how many points we need for optimum winning?
Come on, man. I don't like if it is the case that Greg Joseph is missing kicks so that the Vikings would enter into 1-score possessions late so that they could win. That would be very funny, but no, come on. He's not exploring the secrets of the universe. He's also missing 50+ yard kicks at a weird rate too. It's bad. He's PFF's like worst graded kicker right now. It's bad. Except he's really good at kickoffs. That's the frustrating thing, is that like you replace Greg Joseph, which I don't even know if they would do that at the end of the season, but let's say they do. Let's say they replace Greg Joseph. I don't think they will. The kicker that you're getting is almost certainly not going to be as good at kickoffs as Greg Joseph is. So that's kind of the trade-off there. But no, I don't think that that Greg Joseph, who may or may not be a math genius, that who knows? Kickers and punters are weird. Jeff Locke was like on track to be like a master's economist or something like that. Master's degree in economics, not like a title master economist. But I don't know that that Greg Joseph is seeing into the secrets of the universe and determining that if he misses an extra point, that's better for the Vikings.
I mean, it'd be cool if he was, but that's...
I mean, that would rule.
Yeah. All right, let's see if I can do this. Nolan Kaler asks, can Case Cookus cook us by causing chaos for Carroll, the Chargers, and Cook and Russ in consecutive contests coming up as consistent quarterback for the Cooper Cup-less champs? It could be cause for collective commiseration.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. Good job.
Yeah. Case Cookus, signed by the Rams.
Yeah, practice squad. But
practice squad. Still counts.
Yeah, it still counts. Matthew Stafford might be done. I don't know. John Wolford and Bryce Perkins have been practicing as quarterback ones. It's generally been going to Bryce Perkins. Jonathan Wolford, if you'll remember, was in AAF All-Star for the Arizona Hotshots. Actually, All-Star might not be the right word. Garrett Gilbert was the better quarterback, at least in the league. But was a very good quarterback for the Arizona Hotshots, relatively speaking. Ended up leveraging that into not a practice squad job, a job with the Rams. And now we're getting another minor league quarterback into the Rams facility. Obviously, once they see Case Cookus play, they know that his leg is healthy. They'll cut both Bryce Perkins and Jonathan Wolford and just start Case Cookus, knowing that nothing could go wrong if he's the only quarterback on the roster.
Absolutely. Case Cookus is how you turn that franchise around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Realizing they won a Super Bowl last year, but still, this is how you turn it around.
I mean, you could win multiple Super Bowls.
You could
win the Super Bowl.
Despite the fact that it looks like the Rams, who are giving their draft pick over to the Lions,
would theoretically be picking third overall if they could.
Yeah, it's Pretty amazing. The Logic Dump asks, will we be seeing a pushback against massive, fully guaranteed contracts in the NFL for quarterbacks after some really high-profile players with massive contracts have massively underwhelmed? Example, Wilson, Rodgers, Stafford, Murray, also the likes of Wentz.
I mean, this is just asking the question like some quarterbacks have dropped off, which is true. But like also Deshaun Watson just got like $250 million and they didn't even know if he was going to play. Right. Like that's just what the quarterback market is. I don't think that that's going to happen, especially when you do get payoffs for like the Patrick Mahomes contract, which I mean, if your argument is, hey, he's Patrick Mahomes, you probably get the same argument for, hey, he's Aaron Rodgers, right? I think that the Rams are comfortable with what they got out of Matthew Stafford, given that they got a ring out of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like the Kyler Murray contract was always going to be a little bit risky. They're probably going to explore it again once they fire, finally, Cliff Kingsbury. We'll see if that ends up happening sooner rather than later.
Who is going to get his Bond villain home is my question.
Hey, maybe he keeps a home in Arizona. I would hate to basically get a designer home like that and then sell it. It's like pretty unique. But you know, he'll get a new contract somewhere for many, many millions of dollars, probably as a college head coach. And then he'll just buy a house there too. That's probably what's going to happen. But no, I don't think that that's going to slow down the quarterback market at all, either in terms of total money or in terms of guaranteed money.
Chris asks, which team will tank harder, a Rodgerless Packers or a Fields-less Bears?
I think a Rodgerless Packers is playing all right. Like you take a look at, so my Jordan Love has thrown like 18 passes this season, right? It's not a sample that's worth anything. So let me preface it with that and then ignore what I just said to say, but he's averaging over 10 yards an attempt.
Well, yeah, when you throw that pass to Watson,
the 63-yarder,
that'll skew a couple of stats.
It'll help.
Adrian Peterson didn't rush for 2 yards, to 2 yards an attempt. That's not how that ended.
I mean, hey, if Jordan Love ends up being Adrian Peterson, nobody would be that upset, right? At least on the Packers side.
Yeah.
But no, I think that Jordan Love has a little bit more in terms of how close they can get to winning football than Trevor Siemian and or Nathan Peterman, depending on how Trevor Siemian's ribs are feeling, I guess, that day, or obliques. Yeah, I think that the Fields-less Bears tanks harder. I think that the Packers with Jordan Love will at least attempt to compete, even though they are mathematically eliminated from the division.
Love it. Love it. I'm so tired of hearing about how there's a narrative that the Packers could win out and run the table and do all this. No. It's done. It's done. It's dead. They are done this year. I don't want to hear it. Let's go to the real Jack, who asks, for a Reef's mistimed spellcasting corner,
oh my God.
Whether as a wizard, warlock, sorcerer, it's clear that Kevin O'Connell's magic this season has been centered around ensuring that the Vikings play as many backup quarterbacks as possible, Skylar, Dalton, etc. Mm-hmm. While it hasn't always been perfectly timed, see Dak, it appears as though Kevin O'Connell's spellcraft leaves us poised to encounter another potential backup quarterback in Mike White. But in this case, as perhaps with Heineke, it leads the Vikings to play a potentially far more formidable quarterback. Is this just the kind of run-of-the-mill spellcasting mistake any magical practitioner could make? Or is it possible that this is karmic punishment from the universe or another powerful spellcaster for our alliance with the dark arts?
Boy, that second possibility looms large in my head. So I think initially it's just these are kind of the limitations of the kind of magics that you perform as you begin the season or as the early parts of the season, because you have to set up these spells well in advance. That's why the Dak Prescott mistake occurred, right? As you set up that well in advance, you mistime, like you mentioned, mistime the spell casting a little bit, but because it's so far in advance and you're asking for essentially the universe to grant you an injury boon, which is really difficult, Magic to cast, you're already in a spot where it's kind of difficult to anticipate what's happening. Their hit rate is really good in terms of how often they encounter a downgraded quarterback as a result of this Magic. But with the Taylor Heineke taking over for Carson Wentz, with Mike White taking over for Zach Wilson, you are creating these possibilities that some of the good quarterbacks or some of the bad quarterbacks that you're on the schedule against end up actually being worse than their backups. The thing is, heading into the season, if you said, hey, you got to be careful, some of these quarterbacks are pretty bad, if you put their backups in, they could play better. I would say that's pretty unlikely. Except for Carson Wentz because of the bit. But that's pretty unlikely. Like, generally speaking, the separation between a bad starter and an extremely good backup is still pretty large in the NFL. Like, the NFL does not always have, 32 quarterbacks or whatever. But usually it's just an enormous leap in quality and potential. So, I would say that generally that wouldn't happen. And if you could say, hey, the Vikings are going to play, 17 games this year, I can guarantee you that in 14 of those games, they're going to be playing a back quarterback. You'd say, yeah. And you wouldn't think that like 2 of those times, the quarterback would be better. Or in the case of Jordan Love, 3 of those times, right? It's a kind of an interesting scenario, right? Of how that happens. As for whether or not it's karmic punishment from, the universe, or maybe, I think this is actually more likely another powerful spellcaster is kind of misdirecting or twisting the spell in certain ways. Because, once the spell is cast, it's really difficult to stop. That's just kind of how the nature of the magic works. But it is possible to anticipate it and make it shift in interesting directions, like saying, hey, Mike White's actually going to play pretty well. Hey, Taylor Heineke is actually going to play pretty well. You don't stop the spell, which is to injure the starting quarterback. You make the spell have unintended consequences, which is make backup better. If you're a talented enough spellcaster, there is no karmic punishment because you are paying the spellcasting price at the time of casting, whether that is in some part of soul bond, like with a warlock, whether it is in some part of kind of devotion or a sacrifice of some sort. You've already paid that karmic debt. So that's not a huge concern, unless because it seems like there is some beginner spell casting afoot in this scenario, they didn't pay the full price and this is how it's coming back to them. So it is possible, but I think it's less likely. I think it's more likely that there's another spellcaster twisting it.
This is almost getting too much.
I hate this.
Well, why did you choose a place for us to eat that had a mystic?
I didn't. Look, you mentioned sushi. Mm-hmm. So I looked up sushi near me because I didn't want to drive very far and I didn't care how far you had to drive.
Naturally.
Yeah. And the 3 sushi places closest to me just were not going to be open for lunch, except one of them was, but it was too expensive. I didn't want to take you there because I didn't want to invite you to lunch and then make you pay a ton of money, right? So I looked for a well-reviewed sushi place that was open for lunch that wasn't too expensive, and that one was the closest one. It just so happened that there was apparently a magical bookstore friggin' across the street.
Yep. Cult bookstore right across the street. Ingram's Left Foot asks, for James's relationship and playoffs corner, Jim Mora voice included.
No. Oh, no.
My fiance and I are getting married in Cancun on this in this January. All right. I just happened across the fact that the NFC Championship game is that NFC CC? That just reads as championship.
I assume conference championship.
Yeah, conference championship. Gotcha. Game is that same weekend. Should I start learning how to say Estoy lista para la Angustia de Nuevo, which means I'm ready to hurt again, if I remember correctly.
Is that because you'll ditch the wedding to watch the game, and you'll hurt yourself because you're screwing up the relationship with your soon-to-be wife, or because the game will hurt you and you'll screw up a good weekend because you'll have watched the Vikings lose a game? I can't tell. First of all, I commend you on your scheduling skills to get into Cancun in January, assuming the Vikings wouldn't make the NFC Championship game. Fair bet. Totally understand it. Now you're in Mexico in January. That seems way better than presumably Minnesota. Statistically, that's where you're from, based off of our listenership, right? So I would say not many mistakes were made, but man, are there some mistakes on the horizon. I would say to turn off all of your connections to the outside world while you're in Cancun for a number of reasons. Fourth or fifth on the list of which might be that you might learn something about the Vikings. That seems not ideal. So that's my suggestion. Maybe you'll be able to encounter the game on DVR or tape delay later. Be pretty hard to avoid learning what the outcome of the game is after you end your social media hiatus, but maybe you can do it, and you'll be able to watch the game in a later weekend where you're not concerned about marriage and a honeymoon.
No,
Congratulations.
He's already hosed because destination weddings usually have like a couple of people with too. And you're already going to have to, you're already going to have to manage everything else. You're boned. You're just going to have to accept it that you're going to have the game spoiled for you. And you know what? It was in fact a good bet to think that the Vikings were not going to end up making it to the playoffs, but here we are. Also from Ingram's Left Foot, has the Vikings season turned Adam Schefter into a living curse? Does this change the calculus for the number of cursed objects needed to get to the Super Bowl? So he linked two awful videos on Twitter. One is Adam Schefter doing the gritty, and the other is him shirtless doing the Kirko Chains thing, which is just it hurts.
Brutal stuff. Thank you, Ingram's Left Foot. I hate this name. Okay, so just sorry, 1 second. There is some I did want to mention, like how awful a year Adam Schefter's actually had, and the Washington Post article is not loading. So give me 1 second, actually. October of 2021. Okay. Okay, this is like a hagiography. I don't care. I got the paragraph I needed. All right. 3, 2, 1. Well, I mean, for Adam Schefter, I just feel like he's on his own cursed trajectory, and this is just kind of part of it. I think that the Vikings and Adam Schefter have intersected, but Schefter himself has just been having a bad. I think we've actually hit a year, honestly. So I think I wouldn't say the downfall of Schefter, but I think that the reduction in Schefter's status among people who respected and now no longer respect Adam Schefter started probably in October when he referred to Dan Snyder as Mr. Editor, or not Dan Snyder, a team executive, Bruce Allen, I think, as Mr. Editor when he asked for feedback on a story, which is just crazy for a journalist covering that story to say. And then he reported the running back Dalvin Cook controversy by just accepting, the agent side of the story or Dalvin Cook side of the story without the context of the entire, altercation where both parties are accusing each other of being abusive, and it's a whole mess. And he didn't do that. He had just said that Dalvin Cook was the victim of domestic violence when it was much more than that. And then he tweeted out that after Deshaun Watson was not charged by, who's going to be relevant this week, right, as he's going to start against the Texans of all people, as Deshaun Watson was no longer subject to an investigation in Texas because the grand jury declined to charge him. Schefter tweeted out that Watson had welcomed this case all along because the truth would vindicate him, implying, of course, that the grand jury's decision meant that Watson had been found innocent. He's just been having a bad year ever since that October. We are now in November, the end of November. So it's just part of his bad year. His really awfully hitting the gritty, his Kirko chains. Can't believe we're there. His Kirko chains arc. Just not a great year for Schefter.
Not a good series of looks, no. So has he become
in a very literal sense?
Yeah. Has he become has he become himself a cursed item?
Not in the Viking sense, not in the sense like of how James had created the Dallas loss by bringing Treadwell to the team facility, right? Not in the sense that you've got cursed items that are relating to the Vikings. I think Schefter himself has either accrued a cursed totem that he can't get rid of. Maybe it's his like most recent phone that he needs to shed before he can kind of become a good reporter again, or it is something kind of within him, right? Like we've been talking about, wizards and warlocks and sorcerers, and in particular the price you have to pay to cast some spells. Schefter obviously has something within the divination school of magic, some sort of clairvoyance that allows him to kind of see things, and he has paid a deep karmic price, maybe a sacrifice that he had made at the beginning of the year or something along those lines, but there might be a curse within him. I don't know if it's a cursed item or a curse within him as a product of the way that he finds stuff out, but certainly a pretty bad year. I wouldn't say it has anything to do with the Vikings. I think it's just an intersection there.
Logan asks, Cub Foods sells turkey breasts only in packages that make it look like a whole turkey, thus ruining my Thanksgiving. I thought I was buying a small turkey.
Let this be a lesson. Don't buy turkey.
Chicken breasts aren't sold like this. Is this a crime against humanity, and who should be punished? Sounds like he was.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're the one who got punished. No, I'll say A, don't get turkey. You could have avoided this whole thing by not getting turkey. B, that is evil. I will agree with you that is screwed up.
That's just wrong.
I'm only half blaming the victim here. But certainly, I'm blaming the what do you call it? The assailant, in this case, Cub Foods.
Yeah, I suppose.
Half blaming them. Yeah. First of all, deceptive packaging is always wrong. But second, like if you are to cook turkey well enough, the most redeeming part of the turkey is the dark meat, and just to basically imply, right, that you had a whole turkey that had dark meat, that you'd be able to cook like a dark meat, and it just shows up as turkey breast. That's crazy. Also, another sign that people don't cook turkey outside of Thanksgiving, because turkey breasts are massive. Like the turkey is a large bird compared to a chicken, and so you're pretty unlikely to be able to find a small turkey. And so I'm not shocked that because you don't have a ton of, and not you specifically, but just people in general, don't have a ton of experience cooking whole turkey. It only happens once a year. Don't have a good understanding of the size of a turkey. That two extremely large turkey breasts look like it might be a small turkey. I get it. But like, that's just proof that we don't like cook turkey, probably for a reason, I want to say. But yeah, no, that's an awful crime. It reminds me of the time Pete Buttigieg fixed bread prices in Canada. Very similar. So the crime here is a failed presidential run for whoever made that decision at Cub Foods.
Also from Logan, Arifa stated numerous times that he knows nothing about anime. But on Friday's Minnesota football party, he confirmed for Ron that he used, quote, Super Saiyan Goku correctly. So which is it? Or did Faux Arif let his mask slip?
Hold on, I had no. That's an anime? I had no idea. No, it was a reference to all the memes. You've seen the soccer coach go Super Saiyan, his hair turns yellow or whatever. I had no idea that was an anime. No, to me, that's just a meme.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Did I tell you that I was approached to do voiceover stuff for an anime?
Get out.
Yeah, I was approached and actually gave them my like I say demo reel, but I gave an audition.
Wow. I assume you're not at
Well,
liberty to tell me what anime it was, but
I don't have many more details. When I have more, I'll absolutely be pimping it out on the on the
yeah,
podcast.
I might break my record of never having watched an anime ever once in my life at all. And
Listen to my terrible voice.
yeah, that sounds hilarious.
Like, let's get the whitest North Dakotan we can to do a voice for this. It'll be great.
Perfect.
Cannot wait. Bojack Norseman asks, for Arif's, should I want to be like you when I grew up corner?
No.
Arif has seemingly always been himself in a very public-facing job. Can he touch on the personal/professional dynamic and any sacrifices he has made to remain uncompromisingly himself?
Like how I publicly admit that I never watch anime? Yeah. No, I don't know. Part of it is like, as I'm lucky in a lot of ways, obviously, in that, enough people listen to me that, yeah, I can make a living just talking into a microphone and writing stuff that I think. But I'm lucky in a lot of ways because I grew, probably fast for me, but slow relative to how, big content creators grow up on the internet. A lot of people, when they blow up big really quickly. My journey, which is probably now poorly measured in Twitter followers, but for a long period of time could be approximated by the number of Twitter followers I had. Was like from 0 to 100 to 1,000. I remember that was big. I remember 5,000 was the one I was super happy about. That one was really huge. I want it was like 2013 maybe. And then 5,000 to 8,000 to 10,000, and so it was a relatively small rise or slow rise, and so I could figure out what my public personality was going to be. And at first, it was going to be very kind of buttoned up. I felt like I thought I needed to be very professional. I never swore on my Twitter feed, which if you follow me now on Twitter must be like shocking, right? But I didn't swear on my Twitter feed for like years, right? And I think the first time I swore, somebody was like, "Oh my gosh," which is like very funny to me because I swear like a sailor all the time in real life, and I had to be very careful. But I managed what my public persona would be just because I thought, if I wanted to end up making this my career, and at the time I didn't really have many other options, I would need to be kind of as marketable as possible, and that's what I thought marketability was. And more, it wasn't that I realized that was the wrong decision. It was tiring. And so I just kind of let out parts of my personality that I thought, wouldn't be that much of a problem to reveal. And as time has gone on, I've just revealed different parts of my personality over time. 5 years ago, I don't think I would have been as open about what my politics are as I am now. Maybe 5 is strong, but because what was that, 2017? I was pretty open about my politics. But a number of years ago, I wasn't nearly as open about my politics as I am now. Now it's a big part of my brand, and I'm still fairly closed up about some of my political opinions because I don't think that they're very palatable, and I think that that's fine. And so some of the stuff that I think are due is fairly careful. But some of the stuff is just important to me. So, for example, I care a lot about different human rights issues. I'm very vocal about that, but I also am very aware of the fact that the people who follow me do know and appreciate what my politics are, but are not primarily following me for that. And so I'll make some comments here or there that are related to it. I'll make a comment about, hey, Jordan Peterson, whatever, when Jordan Peterson, gave a speech at the Seahawks, I was critical of that. And I talked about that for a little while. Just random stuff here or there. But it's lucky for me that the direction that my politics tends towards is also a direction that the rest of my content is appealing for as an audience, which I guess is not a complete coincidence, right? Because the way I talk and think also translates into both my politics and the way that I write about football. But it is kind of nice, right? But I mean, there's a lot of me that as time has gone on, I've built as a public persona that is not who I am, kind of in quote unquote in real life, right? There's a part of me that is a brand that's very aware every time I tweet is about my brand. Actually, so I have a tweet right now that is going, I don't know, maybe semi-viral. It has like 2,000 likes now, it looks like. 1,544 likes. So 2,000 when I look on TweetDeck, but when I click through, it's 1,544. It's a tweet about what Deshaun Kaiser is saying about Aaron Rodgers, some absolutely buck wild conspiracy theories that Aaron Rodgers evidently believes. That video was originally sent to me by somebody. It was a much shorter clip, and I needed to make sure that what Deshaun Kaiser was saying was something that didn't look like it was clipped out of context. So I went to the video, I watched those portions of the video to see what he was saying, and I clipped the larger portion of the video and I tweeted that out, right? Because I do want to be careful about this kind of stuff. 40,000 people follow me. More importantly, or is it 40,000? One of the nice things is that after you hit a certain number of followers, you don't care anymore. 44,000 people follow me. But more importantly, people with even more followers also follow me. And so if they see a tweet and they say something on ESPN, right, or if they retweet it to their 100,000 followers, it could blow up in a way that would be misleading and damaging, right? And so I had to spend this is a very funny tweet to me, right? I think it's very funny that Deshaun Kaiser is sharing the fact that Aaron Rodgers is a 9/11 conspiracy truther that apparently also wants to talk about hollow earth theory, lizard people, and whether or not we landed on the moon. That's damaging and nuts and could potentially lead in dangerous directions. We're already seeing that with some other celebrities, both sports and non-sports related, like famously right now. But it's also, like, independent of that, also very funny. And so I really wanted to just retweet this guy's tweet. And I told him, like, I'm sorry, I can't retweet your tweet. But I needed to make sure that, like, this thing that's funny that could go viral and could, make number go up and make me happy as a content creator that I stole someone else's content, clipped it, and now my numbers go up. I needed to make sure that it was not a violation of journalistic ethics. I didn't want to. And so I went and I edited the video together to make sure I got as much context together as possible, both to, explore the fact that initially Deshaun Kaiser just said this opened up a conversation, but then he also said later there is an edit in the video that later on in the conversation, he did talk about additional conspiracy theories, right? And he seems to be fairly convinced of them, right? Which I think implies a lot about the conversations that he and Aaron Rodgers had. I needed to be really careful about that tweet. And it's one tweet. It's one tweet. And sometimes I'm really careful about these one tweets. So in some ways, it looks kind of careless. And obviously during game days, I don't have time to carefully construct these tweets, especially during Vikings games. And so I'll just let some tweets fire off. But I still am always aware of the fact that, 44,000 people follow me and people with 1 million followers follow me. And if they see that and they retweet it, or if they see that and they get mad at me, that's something I have to deal with. I have worked with people who have been on the receiving end of some truly awful harassment campaigns, some of which you can kind of figure out based off of stuff I've said pretty recently over the past couple of months, and some of the stuff I've never talked about before in my life. And they get driven off the internet. They have mental health issues. I totally understand that, like, the internet can turn nasty really quickly. And so I'm always kind of aware of that. And I also have a responsibility to the people I cover to make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong by them. And so it is a very managed brand. It just happens. I'm not doing anything that I don't think, right? I'm not doing anything where the thing that I say that I think is funny, I'm tweeting just because I think other people will think it's funny. It's stuff that I find funny, but it is just a portion of me. This is kind of part of being a content creator. You're not seeing, like, 100% of who I am as a person, the things that I think, or the things that I think are funny, or the people, like, a lot of people that I follow have locked accounts. I can't retweet them. I can like their tweets. And I think I would, maybe get in trouble is the wrong word, because I don't think they're doing anything, like, problematic or anything like that. But I think that, I wouldn't have a lot of fun if they unlock their accounts and, some of the tweets that I like, end up getting shared. Right. It's just like in jokes among a group of people. Again, not stuff that's like racist or anything like that, but more stuff that's just like 8 layers deep in terms of the stuff that they talk about, or related to the politics stuff that I don't talk about that are me, right? And so a lot of the stuff that you see is just it's authentically me, but only a slice of the pie. And it's stuff that I've only been able to do because I was very cognizant of it kind of becoming a content creator. which I'm lucky that I had that kind of foresight and I was overly careful as opposed to careless. And the second thing is I grew slowly compared to a lot of other content creators. So I had time to adapt to the size of my platform every single time.
Yeah, your mistakes have been minor along the way.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Like relative to like a bunch of these. Yeah, absolutely.
Don from Ohio asks, for James and Arif's Christmas presents for Spouse Corner, the wife went she went crazy ordering Christmas gifts this year, which included buying herself multiple items, clothes, coat, laptop, etc. I expressed to her my frustration that she is leaving me fewer choices to give to her on Christmas Day. I did get her a towel/robe warmer for the hot tub area and some of the usual knickknacks such as slippers, robe, necklace, PJs, etc. Outside of my life insurance policy, what other gift could I get for her that would genuinely surprise her?
My life insurance policy. Well, I mean, there's a lot of gifts you could get her that would surprise her, but I assume that you mean like in a pleasant way. Also, I love like how as this bit has grown, he has just kind of leaned into just being this awful husband more and more over time. Like I expressed my frustration to her that she is buying stuff for herself, which leaves me fewer items to give her on Christmas. That's such a dick move. Gifts that she's bought clothes for herself, a coat for herself, a laptop for herself. Gifts that you could give her that would genuinely surprise her, presumably in a positive way. I think you could give her the gift of giving yourself a charcoal grill.
You know, it didn't say in a positive way.
That's why I made it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I was like, you didn't say it, so I'm going to assume that's what you meant, because there's a number of gifts that you could give her that would surprise her, but probably not along the lines of the question.
You know, this is usually the time of year that they have commercials on this sort of thing, and I think this is where you should. Draw your inspiration. Do like the commercials do, and get her a car with a gigantic bow.
Oh God!
Just surprise her with a car. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, especially Alexis. I mean, the Lexus Christmas song is so recognizable and famous that when people hear it, they know that they're getting a Lexus. So make sure that you download that, play it throughout your house the day of Christmas morning to give her kind of a clue that you bought a car for her, especially a Lexus, and then, you blindfold her and lead her outside to the life-changing decision that you made without her.
Exactly. Or you can get yourself a nice big fire pit for the backyard that you can put all of your Ohio State gear in after they lost to Michigan this weekend. Just throwing that out there. There's a lot of very upset Ohio State people.
Including Albert Breer. Did you see his tweets?
I did. That was great. Let's end with Tim Rizzo asking, question for James's Arif is definitely guilty corner. James,
what?
James, despite the holidays coming and going, how can we let Arif get away with the fact that he happened to be unaware of the live show? It wasn't the live show, it was just lunch, taking place right across the street from a dark magic bookshop. You've known him.
If it was the live show and we brought, like, how many people showed up? Like 30?
There was 40? More than 30 people at that show. There was...
Yeah. It's crazy.
there was way more than 30.
My brain. Okay, I don't know, 80. We brought 80 people to a place right across the street from a magic. We would have heard about it. First of all, we would have heard about it immediately. Someone would have said, "Hey, I know what you did. See what's across the street. See this magic bookstore. I understand. I get it."
They don't believe in
the demonology book I bought from that bookstore. Can you sign it? No, it was just lunch. Anyway, continue the question.
The question continues. You've known him most of his life. Can you recall any times as a child when Arif may have done something unusual that could be described as influenced by, quote, dark magic? Perhaps talk to a snake, root for a team in the Pacific Northwest, and gaslight everyone who confronts him about it.
Well, that's your gaslight. That's not how that works.
Or even convince everyone Arif is pronounced differently than it actually is.
Oh my, this is deep lore. Tim, how much of the show have you listened to?
There's some deep cuts in here. As the judge, jury, and executioner on the pod, we need a final ruling against the Wicca charges hereby brought against Arif by the community.
Jesus.
Deep
Goodness.
cuts.
Deep cuts here.
Deep cuts.
Oh my gosh. Aside from how long you've evidently listened to the show, which is not something I should be all that upset about, there's probably people who've been listening since at least the third episode. But to remember some of these deep cuts, that's a lot to me. That's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. Boy, do I remember a time that you would have been speaking to serpents or doing that. Not really. Not really.
That'd be more Victor than me, honestly.
Yeah, that's fair. See, my memories of you when we were growing up were that you just liked to open our door and walk in without knocking.
You left it unlocked. What was I supposed to do?
Expect you to behave by the social contract norms? Even though you were like 5?
Had video game systems that I did not have. So,
yes.
Rules change.
That being said, my parents started locking the door because Arif kept walking through the door. But see, I remember that.
For context, I was like 7.
Not even. You were like 5. My younger brother wasn't much older, but still, it was funny. But like, that's all I've got. Like, there's nothing peculiar. Like, I wasn't close with your older brother. I knew him. I was friends with him on the debate and speech team and everything, but we were never close. I was never over at your place. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I ever stepped foot in your house. So
really?
I don't believe I may have. I was in the backyard at one point because we kicked a ball over.
Right.
But
you probably showed up to like my brother's graduation party or something.
I never did.
Oh wow. Okay.
I say I wasn't invited. I did not go to that.
It was like most graduation parties. It was open. But.
Yeah. But no, I did not. Despite the fact that like all of my friends went, Dusty went. I never did.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've ever stepped foot in your house. So no, my memories are like that. And I may have like wrestled around with you at some point because that's what Victor would have like. I would have just gone down to terrorize my younger brother. But no, there's no serpents here. It's just Arif being Arif, or in this case, Araf. Boy, I don't. That's like 3 years old at least.
Yeah, at least 3, if not longer.
Arif having the wrong pronunciation on his name, or being corrected as to what his pronunciation should be.
Right. Yeah.
That is terrifying. Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back on Thursday to preview the Jets game, so check that out. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I've got a couple of pieces up at Pro Football Network. A piece on how selfish Aaron. I really wish I'd encountered this video before I wrote that piece. But how selfish Aaron Rodgers was with regards to playing through the thumb injury, going 1-6 while his thumb was injured, while Jordan Love was just kind of sitting there waiting to play. Which again, I understand, right? If you're a monomaniacal quarterback, you think that you can play through it and all that, but at some point, push comes to shove, you're hurting the team. So I've got that piece over at Pro Football Network. We've got a piece covering a couple of the games, or at least one of the games from the weekend as well. I've got a piece coming up. Deshaun Watson's going to start for the Browns against the Houston Texans. So I got a piece coming up about that. On Thursday, I'll also have a piece up about Trevor Lawrence and the game that he had against the Ravens, but also just kind of the season that he's having, which I think is underrated. So you can find over that all of that stuff over Pro Football Network, obviously because the Vikings are playing really well, and I'm very familiar with the Vikings. They do want me to write about the Vikings a lot. So you'll also see Vikings pieces fairly consistently over there, including probably one of my weirdest, but I think more well-written. Not as weird or as well-written as the London Saints Vikings thing, but a weirder, well-written one that I think I did a pretty good job with covering the Thanksgiving game. So you can find that all over at ProFootballNetwork.com.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that this is not sustainable. And we will be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.